And Trump is in London for meetings with British Prime Minister Theresa May. The UK is experiencing political turmoil as Prime Minister May attempts to negotiate her country's exit from the European Union. Mark Phillips is in London, where protesters have been gathering outside the U.S. ambassador's residence.
A ceremonial military band may have greeted the President and First Lady at Blenheim Palace, the impressive country estate west of London where Winston Churchill was born, but this was not the grand state visit he had been promised. This is a much-delayed, much-diminished working visit, all of it being held away from central London, where protesters have prepared a special welcome. The Trump baby, they call it, to float over a massive anti-Trump march tomorrow.
Why the baby?
Leo Murray calls himself the Trump baby's daddy.
He is uniquely vulnerable to personal insults. And so we've just got right down on his level to speak to him in a language that he understands.
For protesters to plan this sort of stunt is one thing. For British authorities, the police, air traffic control, even the mayor to give permission for it to happen is not an accident. It's almost an endorsement.
The president has come to Britain with plenty of baggage, an ongoing feud with London's mayor, Sadiq Khan, who he's accused of being soft on terrorism. And tonight, a newspaper interview where he says Prime Minister May's arch-rival, Boris Johnson, who's just quit as foreign minister, would make a good PM himself.
I'm not pitting one against the other. I'm just saying I think he'd be a great prime minister, yeah.
So there'll be no grand carriage ride to Buckingham Palace, as Woodrow Wilson enjoyed almost 100 years ago, and as many other leaders have enjoyed since. No grand state dinner, just tea with the Queen at Windsor Castle. Despite what the president says,
I think they like me a lot in the UK.
It may not be the reception he has in mind. Mark Phillips, CBS News, London.
For more on President Trump's visit to England, I'd like to bring in Edmund Heaphy. He is a reporter for Quartz, and he joins me now from London. Edmund, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Elaine.
So let's start with Brexit. This is a tumultuous week for Theresa May. Boris Johnson, her Foreign Affairs Secretary, just resigned, and May is negotiating a quote-unquote soft Brexit. First, can you remind us of the difference between a soft and hard Brexit?
Sure. So Britain voted to leave the European Union in 2016, and since then the debate has been about how exactly it will end up leaving when it does so in March next year. A soft Brexit would essentially mean that it maintains a close relationship with the European Union. So it might have an elaborate and expansive trade deal that would mean that the existing arrangement between Britain and the European Union could stay largely the same. A hard Brexit, on the other hand, would mean that Britain would essentially crash out of the European Union. It mightn't have a trade deal. There'd be no deal whatsoever. It would have serious economic impacts. And so the controversy over the past week has arisen because Theresa May, the UK Prime Minister, agreed with her cabinet on a soft Brexit deal, essentially, which would see Britain maintaining close ties with the European Union.
Well, President Trump spoke about Brexit during a press conference in Brussels. Let's listen to some of what he had to say.
I would say that, Brexit is Brexit. It's not like, I guess when you use the term hard Brexit, I assume that's what you mean. The people voted to break it up. So I would imagine that's what they'll do, but maybe they're taking a little bit of a different route. So I don't know if that's what they voted for.
Is President Trump undermining Theresa May as she negotiates her country's withdrawal from the European Union?
I mean, it certainly will be seen as undermining, but at this stage, I think world leaders are more than used to outlandish statements from Donald Trump. The issue there is that Trump's views are kind of felt by a lot of the right-wing fringe of her own political party. They feel that the reason that most people voted for Brexit was because of immigration, and if Britain negotiates a soft Brexit deal, it means that it mightn't have control over immigration and won't be able to stop it. So that's essentially what Trump is referring to there. And the issue is that his views are reflected and causing problems for Theresa May at home, even without his comments.
Well, officials are expecting widespread protests during President Trump's visit. Do we know what specific issues protesters are planning to raise?
Well, so the organizer of the main march tomorrow, which is going to leave from the headquarters of the BBC here in London and march towards Trafalgar Square, where there'll be a big rally. And the lead organizer is a left-wing journalist and columnist for The Guardian called Owen Jones. And he has taken a lot of time to outline how the protest is against what Trump represents and not necessarily Trump himself. So that's sexism, racism, xenophobia, misogyny, all the kind of things that Trump ushered into the Oval Office. That's what the march is against. And essentially, Jones is saying that Trump's election is kind of part of a long trend that has culminated in him getting to the White House.
Well, what can you tell us about the so-called baby Trump blimp, which is scheduled to fly above Parliament?
So yes, an anti-Trump activist crowdfunded and raised about £18,000 sterling, which is about 24,000 US dollars, for the creation of a 20-foot balloon of a baby Donald Trump. And he actually secured permission from the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who gave permission for it to be flown near the Houses of Parliament for a 2-hour period tomorrow. There was a lot of speculation then today that the activist who owns the balloon might try and get it flown over Trump's golf course in Turnberry in Scotland, where Trump will be spending 2 days over the weekend. But police in Scotland declined his request.
Well, lastly, a little royal etiquette. Queen Elizabeth has met every U.S. president since Eisenhower, except Lyndon Johnson, because he never visited England while in office. So what are the do's and don'ts of meeting the Queen, and what can the president expect from the meeting?
Well, so the website of the royal family actually says that there are no essentially hard rules of etiquette when meeting the Queen, but of course it has some suggestions. When you meet the Queen, you should do a short bow, and you should shake her hand when she puts out her hand. Obviously, Trump should avoid the kind of never-ending handshake battles that he's tended to get into with world leaders like French President Emmanuel Macron. But other than that, there's not a lot of rules. You should definitely avoid touching. Michelle Obama kind of skirted controversy when she visited a number of years ago by putting her arm around the Queen, and that was seen as a bit of a faux pas. What he should expect, really, is small talk with the Queen and expect her to lead the way. As you said, she's met so many U.S. presidents and is more than experienced at dealing with all manners of characters and all types of strange world leaders. So it will essentially be a politically neutral conversation. The Queen is meant to stay above politics and probably will try and avoid addressing any of the most contentious aspects of Donald Trump's presidency.
All right, Edmund Heaphy. Edmund, thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Elaine.